benza guru pema cd hong wong ah hung benza guru pema cd hong wong ah hung benza guru pema cd hong. Hello everyone and welcome to my Saturday Dharma talk on Sunday night this week. I apologize for that. Also, I apologize in advance if I sound a little wheezy tonight because I am suffering a bit from my cat. I am slightly allergic to my cat. So, today we are completing the first division of the Digha Nikaya, which is the first book of the Sutta Pitaka, the suttas or dialogues of the Buddha. And the first section is called the Moralities. It consists of 13 suttas, and today is the Tevijja Sutta, number 13 in the series, and we will conclude with a summary of the suttas that we've covered so far. And it should take approximately 1 hour with question and answer at the end. So without further ado, let's begin. Astute students may recognize two English words in the title of the sutta. Pali te is three or threefold, whereas vijja clearly is vision, or more properly, knowledge or wisdom. Thus, Walsh translates this as the sutta of the threefold knowledge, the opposite of avijja, ignorance or not knowing or no vision, but with an ironic twist, as we shall see, speaking of humor. Kosala, the country of Kosala where the Buddha is, we've discussed before. We're not going to go over that again. All I know about the village of Manasakata is that it is the name of a village, located south of the river Chirawate, now known as the river Rapti, or Rapti. And that's a picture of the river Rapti on the slide. The name means mind begotten. That's the name of the village, means mind begotten, from the Pali Manasa plus Kata. Shravasti or Sawati is also located on the bank of this river, located in mid-southern Nepal, although I do think it goes over the border into India as well. The Buddha stayed at a mango grove on the bank of this river. A number of Brahmins were staying in the town, described as rich and famous. It sounds pretty much like our society. It's not that different. One of these, Tevijja, is the father of Subba, who would later ask Ananda to explain to him the things that the Buddha praised and dispraised after the parinirvana. He did this in the Subba Sutta, which we've already discussed. It came up, I think it's number 3 in the series. Two young Brahmins, Vaseta and Bharadwaja by name, began to argue between themselves while walking along the road about right and wrong paths leading to union with Brahma. Vaseta advocated the philosophy of the Brahmin Pokarsati, while Bharadwaja defended Taruka. Pokarsati is the Brahmin in the Ambata Sutta, and pardon me, that is number 3 in the Digha Nikaya. The Ambata Sutta, which we have already discussed, whose student insults the Buddha. You may remember he sends his pupil to the Buddha to test him by observing the 32 marks of a Buddha, if I'm not mistaken, and he's quite insulting to the Buddha while he was there. Concerning Taruka, I have not been able to find out anything. In any case, the two youths could not agree on whose teacher was right, each believing that their own teacher alone was the true one. They agree to take the question to the Buddha, who is in the vicinity, and to abide by his decision as arbitrator. The two complain to the Buddha about how many different paths there are, in the course of which they name 5 Brahmanic schools, which is useful information for us. These are the Adaryans, the Titarians, the Chandokans, the Chandavans, and the Brahmacharyans, or according to some translators, Bhavharijans. And Walsh describes the first 4 as Vedic priests who relied on liturgy, sacrifice, or chant, contrasted with some ascetics who practiced chastity. And we can see in the word chanter, in the word chandoka, this is Sanskrit, by the way, not Pali, which also appears as chandoga, and chastity in the word brahmacharya. The Titariya or Taittiriya means pupils of the Taittirians, who are a Brahmanic sect or school or philosophy. A better Sanskritist than I might be in a position to cast further light on the meaning of these words, but that's what I was able to ascertain from my Sanskrit dictionary. Rather than choose one, the Buddha asks Vaseta whether any of these Brahmins, their ancestors going back 7 generations, or even the rishis, the original makers and expounders of the mantras, have actually ever seen Brahma face to face. Compare the biblical tradition of seeing God face to face. The Buddha names 10 such rishis. This list also occurs in the Vinaya Pitaka in the Mahavaga. I'll give the reference when my talk is posted on my blog. You can find the reference there if you're interested in looking it up. In the latter, the Buddha declares that the true Veda was revealed to the rishis, but subsequently distorted by priestcraft. This is the view of the rishis to which I am also coming through my own study of the Suttas. That is to say, that's the view of the rishis that I'm coming to contribute to the Buddha, based on other suttas that I've read. Clearly, the Buddha had great respect for the ancient Indian tradition and its antecedents, but regarded Brahmanism as a decadent remnant of the original spiritual tradition. Much like Yeshua's attitude to the Pharisees, or the Jewish establishment in Jerusalem, of course. Very similar to that, in fact. Concerning Attaka, Vamaka, and Vamadeva, and actually, before I get into them, let me just post them in the chat. I don't have a note card for the list of the names, but since I'm going to be talking about them a bit, I'll put them in the chat so you can see who I'm talking about. So concerning Attaka, Vamaka, and Vamadeva, or Vamadevya, sorry, which are the first 3 in the list, I wasn't able to find out anything useful, but the rest are great rishis, including 6 of the 7 sages, or Tapta Rishi, of the constellation of Ursa Major, consisting of 7 bright stars that point to the pole star or axis mundi. In Vedic astrology, each of these stars corresponds to one of the Sapta Rishi, the 7 sages or rishis. Interestingly, the Buddha's parinirvana occurred just about 1 Ursa Major cycle, or 2,700 years, after the traditional date of the advent of the Kali Yuga, which would put his passing in 402 before the Common Era, BCE. As I've mentioned in other talks, modern scholarship is moving the Buddha's death date significantly more recently than was traditionally held. So for approximately 400 before the Common Era, plus or minus 20 years, is the majority view now in Western scholarship in terms of when the Buddha actually died. And that's an ancient Vedic drawing of the Ursa Major constellation showing the seven stars, or the 7 rishis. And the 7 sages authored different parts of the Vedas as well as other things. So going down the list, Sataka, Vamaka, Vamadeva, I have no information. Concerning Vesamita, also spelt Vesamito or Vishvamitra. And yes, thank you very much. He was formerly a king. Vesamita is venerated as a great and powerful rishi of ancient India and the discoverer of the Gayatri Mantra. The Gayatri Mantra is a Vedic Sanskrit verse from Rig Veda 3.62.10, and I'll give you the text and translation of it. It is associated with Savitri and is therefore called the Savitri Mantra. Means literally impeller, rouser, or vivifier. Savitri is the son of Aditi, the mother of the gods in the 12 signs of the zodiac, and Savitri is also associated with the vivifying influence of Surya, the sun, especially just before sunrise. I'm not going to embarrass myself by trying to pronounce the Sanskrit mantra, but I will post it in the chat. The first line is a preliminary to the mantra proper, and the next three lines are the actual quotation from the Rig Veda, and Vivekananda in 1915 translated this as, quote, "We meditate on the glory of that being who has produced this universe. May he enlighten our minds." Concerning Yamatagi, or Jamadagni, or Jamdagni, she is one of the seven sages. Actually, I'm not sure now if it's a she or a he. Sorry about that. He or she is one of the seven sages and a descendant of Brigu. Angirasa, also spelled Angirasa or Angiraso, is another of the seven sages, the reputed father of the ancestors of humanity. He is also credited as being a direct ancestor of the Buddha. He is said to have been born out of the divine intellect of Brahma. Brahma assigned to him the task of caring for the welfare of Brahma's creation. Bharadwaja, also spelled, same spelling, Bharadwaja or Bharadwajo, a descendant of Angirasa and one of the seven sages. He was renowned for his scholarship and meditative accomplishments, including the attainment of egolessness, and he is the reputed author of the Ayurveda, the great medical text of Vedic medicine. Vaseta, also spelt Vasista or Vaseto, another of the seven sages. He is supposed to have authored a book on the Vedic system of electional astrology. Kassapa or Kassapo, all I was able to find out is that he's one of them, one of the seven sages. And finally, Bhagu or Brigu, another of the seven sages, inventor of predictive astrology. Krishna compares Bhagu to the opulence of God, quote unquote, in the Bhagavad Gita. And you'll notice that the names of our two youths who have come to talk to the Buddha are the same as two of the rishis, Bharadwaja and Vaseta. I don't have anything particularly to make out of that, other than it's a coincidence of name, presumably, and I have nothing further to make out of that coincidence. Presumably they were named after the rishis, and presumably this was common in Vedic India. 6 of these rishis belong to the 7 sages, or Saptarishi, but it is impossible to say who the missing rishi is, since different lists exist, none of which corresponds to the Buddhist list exactly. There are at least 11 possible candidates, therefore, one of whom, interestingly, is named Gautama, the proper name of the Buddha. Again, I have nothing particular to make out of that, but it's just an interesting coincidence. So that slide is an image of Rishikesh in India, which is the reputed homeland of the rishis. And Walsh describes these as the 10 rishi authors of the Vedic mantras. The rishis, whose number included both men and women, an important point to note in the context of my talk on the status of women in ancient India and the Pali tradition, these were ecstatic seers whose utterance inspired the Vedas, which were then recited orally from generation to generation, and actually the tradition was kept alive before they were finally written down for something like 3,000 years, I believe. The rishis are enlightened householders, married with descendants. When recited aloud, their verses invoke the devas. It is reasonable to suppose that the hymns of the Rig Veda were inspired by the devas when the rishis entered into ecstatic trance states. A similar cult is associated with the ayahuasqueros of Peru. The rishis understood the art of traveling in a mental body, which involved the creation of an imaginal mind-body and its projection into higher dimensions of reality, with which they conversed with the devas and manifested their wisdom, power, and beauty in the form of song. And Vivekananda called them seers of thought. Now, I do like to illustrate my talk sometimes with images and also sometimes with videos. I was able to find a somewhat interesting, short, somewhat interesting video on the rishis from a Hindu point of view rather than a Buddhist point of view, although there is a somewhat amusing reference to Buddhism in the course of the video. So at this point, we're going to stop the talk. There is the link. If you would click it and open it in your browser and watch the short video, then we will return to the talk after it is over, and I'll watch along with you. So I'm going there now.
Comes from the word manas.
Back and I think it's
It is
5.
better to worship something good. But man, manava, like I said, manava comes from the word manas, and manas means awareness. It also means mind. Homo sapiens sapiens, man who is aware, he is aware. That is our biological classification. So right there you have it. The animal that is aware that it is aware, because anybody who's kept pets know that animals have consciousness, they have cleverness, they even have awareness, But are they aware that they are aware? I'm not so sure about cats. I think cats are pretty aware that they are aware. Dogs are not. Dogs are not. So this notion of manava, the person who accepts the limitation of the skin, as it is called, accepts the limitation of the mrityuloka, is the only person who can break free of karma. Otherwise, you do a lot of good karma, you get promoted, you become a god, you get worshipped. Once that stock of karma exhausts, back here. So the manava is the only person who can break free of the karmic cycle and become what is called a rishi, that is a person who perceives reality directly without all the karmic and cosmic filters. A rishi means a person who can see, a person who can perceive reality directly. We have the concept of Maya, which is mistranslated as illusion. That is not what it's saying. What it is saying is that what we see, perceptual reality is false. We see a flat earth, we see a still earth. We know that is not true. Our perceptions deceive us at every moment. Conceptual reality is the truth. So the rishi is the person who can function from the conceptual reality, the absolute truth. And what he sees is the truth. He does not see the deceptions of the world, or he does not see the traps of the world, or he does not see, again, it's a skin limitation. Because of our skin limitation, we cannot push back until we discovered spaceships and we could push back, and then we can actually see the planet hanging in space, and we can actually see the,
curvature.
The curvature of the land and things like that. So Manava, in that sense, was always the most important thing. Manava was the most important thing for consciousness to evolve. You see, because consciousness tried multiple ways. It tried size with the dinosaurs. Didn't work. It tried beauty with the birds and the fishes and the butterflies, and that didn't work. It tried sheer power and strength, and that didn't work. So it's trying multiple ways to attain something. So it is well known in yoga that we are a transitional species. Even Manava is a transitional species. We are heading towards something. We are heading towards that Purushottama. Certain people who are called enlightened or liberated or masters have done it before. They have managed it before. They can come and give us some glimpses. They are the people who come and announce, we are Amritasya Putra, children of immortality. So only as being in the human state can we move back to that Godhead. Now, of course, the question you will ask, why did this happen? Why are human beings or devas trapped in this cycle of karma? I really do not know. The answer to that is, once you have attained, once you are liberated, you know. I really do not know. And it's a very, very complex, knotty, and there's really no satisfactory answer. Things are the way they are.
But there's no answer to what happens also when a deva, what the deva goes up to.
He can either come back here and start all over again, or he can go to another plane where he is not a deva and he can do his sadhana there. He can try to become a rishi. You see, the devatas have too many pleasures, which is why amongst all the devatas there is only one rishi, and that turns out to be Narad, He's Deva Rishi, Human beings have more rishis, Rakshasas have more rishis than the devas. Can you imagine that? Because the potential to be a rishi is very strangulated when you are a deva. You don't become a, and of course in Buddhism what happened is that while they did displace the gods, they immediately replaced it with Buddha and the Sangha, And if you have the slightest question against the Buddha and the Sangha, that is it. You are lost forever.
You cannot have a question.
You cannot have a question. So, again, that is not freedom. Though yoga has always been the most free that way. Yoga has always been the most free that way, and which is why the person who is enlightened is what counts in the culture. And whatever you do, any practice that you take up, any nonsense that you do, if it takes you one step towards enlightenment, this culture will accept. This culture has this staggering tolerance of eccentricity and weirdness. And it comes from here because I don't know. It won't work for me, but it might work for him. Which is why the concept of Shiva, if you look at Shiva, he's such a weirdo. He acts strange, he lives in strange environments, he has strange companions, he has strange behaviors, and yet at the same time, he is the ultimate Godhead. So the culture designed it that if you can accept Shiva, you can easily put up with anybody else. It was a very short form of accepting.
Okay, that's the video. Did anybody notice the reference to Buddhism in the video? And if you did notice it, do you remember what he had to say about Buddhism? Do you remember what he said? And given our discussions of the suttas so far, would you say that that is an accurate statement? Good. You'll notice in the comments, I made a comment about that. That statement absolutely shows that he has not read the Buddhist suttas, because if he had read them, he would know that that is absolutely not true, that the spirit of questioning utterly pervades the Pali Canon. And he obviously has no knowledge of which he speaks, at least on that topic. But in general, his talk was interesting. From a Hindu perspective, of course, not from a Buddhist perspective, clearly. Yes, and he shows the bias of the religionist. That is actually is, that not asking of questions is the bias of the religionist. And I'm sure there are religious Buddhists who believe that, but he attributed that to Buddhism, and that's the mistake that he makes, and the mistake that religious Buddhists make too. So anyway, let's carry on then. Even these divinely inspired seers had not seen Brahma face to face. Therefore, the Buddha declares the entire Vedic Brahmanic conceit is ill-founded because it is speculative, not based on actual experience. The Buddha declares the Brahmins to be like the blind leading the blind. Quote, the talk of these Brahmins, learned in the three Vedas, turns out to be laughable, mere words, empty and vain. Unquote. Vaseta agrees with the Buddha that the Brahmins see the sun and the moon just like everybody else, and that, although they may sing praises to, and worship the sun and the moon, this does not mean that they know the path to union with the sun and the moon. We learned in the previous sutta that even the Brahmas could not predict when, how, or where Brahma would appear. Therefore, neither did the rishis and neither do the Brahmins know this, nor do they know the way to union with Brahma. The Buddha compares the Brahmins, rather ludicrously, to a young man searching for the perfect girl, without knowing when, how, or where he will find her, or even what she looks like. To a man building a staircase at a crossroads, that is to say, without a house, just building the staircase out in the open at a crossroads. Or a man trying to cross a raging river by beckoning to the other side. Moreover, he says the Brahmins neglect what they should do and do what they should not do. This criticism of the Brahmins for self-indulgence and general laxity is frequently leveled against them by the Buddha. The Buddha also rejects the method of Deva invocation, including prayer, to attain union with Brahma. Thus, the Buddha rejects the fundamental premise of religious theism. As we have discussed before, he says that the Brahmins are enslaved by sense desires, which are bonds and fetters. In addition, they are hindered by sensuality, ill will, sloth and torpor, worry and flurry and doubt, encumbered by wives, wealth, hatred, ill will, impurity, and lack of discipline. By comparison, the Buddha notes that Brahma is unencumbered by wives and wealth, hatred, ill will, impurity, and lack of discipline. If one does not possess the characteristics of Brahma at death, then how can he or she be reborn as Brahma? The law of karma forbids it. Quote, "Therefore their threefold knowledge is called the threefold desert, the threefold wilderness, the threefold destruction." Unquote. The Brahman Vaseta's rather unlikely response is that he has heard that the Buddha knows the way to union with Brahma. The assertion that the Buddha has this reputation itself is interesting. When Vaseta tells the Buddha this, the Buddha says, and I'm quoting, "What do you think, Vaseta? Suppose there were a man here born and brought up in Manasakata, and somebody who had come from Manasakata and had missed the road should ask him the way. Would that man born and bred in Manasakata be in a state of confusion or perplexity?" To which Vaseta answers that he would not. And the Buddha continues, "And why not? Because such a man would know all the paths." The implication, then, is that the Buddha is the one who knows all the paths. Elsewhere, the Buddha compares the Dharma to an overgrown path leading to the abandoned ruins of a long-forgotten city in the midst of an ancient forest. An overgrown path leading to the abandoned ruins of a long-forgotten city in the midst of an ancient forest, perhaps a mind-begotten city. Moreover, the Buddha knows more than the Brahmin speculators do. He himself has traveled this path and knows the path of practice that leads to union with Brahma. Finally, the Buddha makes his point. The way to union with Brahma, the Buddha says, consists in the attainment of three things: the practice of morality or self-restraint, the first jhana or meditative accomplishment, and the practice of metta-meditation, the contemplation on loving kindness. The Buddha describes this meditation thus, quote, "With his heart filled with loving kindness, he dwells suffusing one quarter, the second, third, the fourth. Thus he dwells suffusing the whole world, upwards, downwards, across, everywhere, always with a heart filled with loving kindness, abundant, unbounded, without hate or ill will. Then with his heart filled with compassion, with sympathetic joy, with equanimity, he dwells, suffusing one quarter, the second, the third, the fourth. Thus he dwells, suffusing the whole world, upward, downwards, across, everywhere, always with a heart filled with equanimity, abundant, unbounded, without hate or ill will." Unquote. In this doctrine of meditation on compassion leading to rebirth in the kingdom of the heaven of the Brahmas, if you can call it that, the doctrine of meditation on compassion leading to rebirth in the kingdom of the heaven of the Brahmas, the Buddha is setting forth a teaching that would be echoed 400 years later by Yeshua, the great Jewish bodhisattva of Galilee, along with many other elements of the Dharma. Nevertheless, rebirth in the Brahma worlds is not the goal of Dharma, which aims much higher. Indeed, Dharma aims beyond anything that is capable of being conceptualized, though one must reach that point of transcendent realization through the cultivation of wisdom. Interestingly, the Buddha adds this easily overlooked detail, and I quote, "He leaves nothing untouched, nothing unaffected in the sensuous sphere. This Vaseta is the way to union with Brahma." That's somewhat remarkable. Buddhism has a reputation for asceticism and renunciation, but here the Buddha is saying that in order to attain an advanced Devic rebirth in the heaven of Brahma, he leaves nothing untouched, nothing unaffected in the sensuous sphere, which is, of course, the name, the proper name of the Kamaloka, the world of sense desires, which is the world that we inhabit. This Vaseta is the way to union with Brahma. This point corresponds to the Buddha's emphasis on mindfulness of the body, which we discussed in a previous talk. So at this point, I have another short video. I think this one's a little shorter, maybe 4 minutes. It's a short talk on meditation by a Theravada monastic who I like. And we'll go there now and watch it, and then we'll return to continue with the talk.
Metta means loving kindness. Means wishing well, wishing all beings to be happy. And metta differs from love generally in that it is not directed solely to one person or one group of people. But having said that, you usually start off with meditation following the principle that you start off with the easy and work towards the difficult. Now, if you're someone who is racked with self-aversion and you're not very good friends with yourself, then the traditional recommendation to begin with spreading metta to yourself might not work for you. If it doesn't matter, but at least give it a try. Think of all the good, the noble, beautiful things that you would like to develop in your life and wish them to yourself. May I be peaceful, may I be kind, may I be wise, may I be good. All those things that you aspire to in your life, and wish them sincerely for yourself. And as you develop this sense of warmth, then feel as if you're breathing in and breathing out through the chest area, and feel you're breathing in goodness and happiness and light and brightness, and you're breathing out, and all that kindness and goodness and nobility is streaming out from the heart area, out in all directions. Now, this is one way to begin the metta meditation. Another is to take someone that you look up to, someone you respect, better if it's someone of your own sex, so that more worldly feelings won't creep up on you and undermine the metta. But you could take a puppy or a cat or any kind of living creature, that when you think of that person or that creature, you just feel that kind of very warm, lovely kind of loving kindness feeling that I'm sure you have some experience of. And you take that as your object and you try to expand it. Now, to begin with, you just take one object, this person, a particular person, could be yourself, could be the puppy or whatever, and develop this warmth and kindness, breathing in, breathing out for this creature. After a while, if it starts to get a little bit stale, then you can move back to yourself or to some other loved one. So to begin with, we want to create the ability to sustain this sense of warmth and loving kindness before developing it further and spreading loving kindness to associates, people to whom we have no strong feeling for, or eventually to those people who we have some problem with, that we have some anger towards or feel upset with. So there are many different ways, and this is just a very short introduction to metta, and you can be creative and you can try different things out. You don't necessarily have to follow the books, but there is to summarize, there is one way where you start off developing loving kindness for yourself, for the respected one, for the loved one, for family members, and so on, and gradually expanding it out to all the people in this this monastery or this town, this city, this country, this world, the different levels of beings. So that method is using a certain amount of discursive thought to keep the meditation on track. The other one is that the other method is that once you identify with this feeling, and this is what metta means, this warmth, this very positive, loving feeling, then you can take that particular feeling as your meditation object without using the discursive thought and without spreading it to particular individuals or groups and so on. And that is a way which will lead to great peace and bliss within the mind.
Okay, there we go with the video on meditation. The Buddha invites Vaseta to compare the qualities of Brahma with the qualities of the Buddhist monastic. Vaseta agrees that they possess identical qualities. Thus, the Buddha implies it is the monastic who attains union with Brahma. Thank you, KJ Inglewood. Vaseta and Bharadwaja take refuge as lay householders in Gautama, the Dharma, and the Sangha. This sutta is often interpreted as though the Buddha did not really mean it, that the whole sutta is an elaborate ruse to trick Vaseta and Bharadwaja into the right path. I think this conclusion implies a lack of respect and even a shady character that I do not believe that the Buddha had. Rather, the Buddha is revealing to Vaseta and Bharadwaja the inner meaning of their own premises. The Buddha is also revealing a way of religion suited to the Brahmins and the lay householders, whereas the Buddha intimates that the monastics possess an even more subtle and profound interpretation that reveals the ancient and archaic heart of the Dharma, long lost by and forgotten to the Brahmins, whom he addresses and berates for their superficial character, not because he is opposed to Brahmanism as such, but rather because he is opposed to the orthodoxy of exotericism that has come to dominate the religion of the late Vedic period, characterized as it was by ritualism and dogmatism. Against this, the Buddha posits the way of the rishis, whose religion was grounded in direct knowledge based on immediate ecstatic experience. Okay, that completes the first division. That completes the Tevijja Sutta, I should say. And the Tevijja Sutta is the last sutta of the first division of the Digha Nikaya, entitled The Moralities. All of these suttas we've been studying for the last few weeks. Collectively, they are referred to as the Moralities. Those of you who have been following along in the Walsh translation will know that this collection of 13 suttas is highly repetitive, referring again and again to self-restraint, or morality, the jhanas, the insights, the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, and nirvana from various angles. In addition to this exploration, we have gleaned many insights into the nature of the Buddha Dharma. To conclude this talk, I will briefly summarize what we have learned in the course of discussing the first 13 suttas. The first thing we learn in the first sutta of the Sutta Pitaka is that the moral rules and regulations may impress people, but are in themselves not sufficient or adequate to describe the Tathagata or to attain awakening or emancipation itself. Ethics and morality are, quote, elementary and inferior, quote unquote. Thus, the Sutta Pitaka begins with an extensive exploration of what the Dharma is not. In particular, the Dharma is not ethics or speculation. We are also introduced to the centrality of rationality in the spiritual quest, somewhat refreshingly. All speculative views are rejected because dualistic rationality cannot penetrate the mystery, the ultimate mystery of Dharma, which is transcendent, transrational, and transdual. Realization is only attainable by direct intuitive experience. Therefore, any view that can be conceptualized as a world is a trap that leads to rebirth in just that sort of world. True awakening is beyond all views and beyond rationality itself. Sorry, I just lost my spots. The note card just popped up and caused everything to disappear. Hold on. Okay, there we go. True awakening is beyond all views and beyond rationality itself, and is therefore an uncharacterizable mystery. That's the first sutta. In the second sutta, we learn what are the fruits of the monastic life, which include 4 meditative accomplishments, or jhanas, culminating in perfect insight, 5 psychic powers, culminating in the divine eye, whereby one perceives the karma of others, and finally perfect mindfulness, awakening and emancipation. In addition, we learn of the centrality of the mindfulness of the body in Buddhist practice, a fact that is noted in particular by Buddhaghosa. In the third sutta, we learn that caste and race are irrelevant. In the fourth sutta, we begin to see that the Buddha's Dharma corresponds to the ancient Indian religion of which contemporary Brahmanism is merely a degenerate remnant, and that the true Dharma, or the true Brahma, I should say, is, the true Brahman is the spiritual practitioner based on his or her spiritual qualities alone. In the fifth sutta, we learn how the Buddha reinterpreted Brahmanic ritualism in ethical and spiritual terms, and the Buddha's social and political philosophy, which I have typified in contemporary language as social democracy. In the sixth sutta, we see how Buddhist spirituality was practiced and experienced, including the reality of altered states of consciousness and psychic powers. The Buddha also sets out the path of the Arhat and alludes to the mind stream, or santana, and the intuition that the body is sentience, or the intuition of the body as sentience, or the intuition of the sentience of the body, if you want to put it that way. In the eighth sutta, the Buddha declares that the practices of asceticism are superficial, mechanical observances that can be performed by anyone, but that the true asceticism is an asceticism of the mind, as well as the 10 criteria that establish the truth of the Buddha's speech, the Buddha Vachana. In the ninth sutta, the Buddha asserts the absoluteness of the law of karma. Nothing that occurs is causeless or fails to have its effect. Further, the Buddha sets out the whole process of mindfulness, beginning with controlled perception and leading through stages to the limit of perception and cessation. He teaches that no worlds are excluded from suffering, and therefore the attainment of emancipation transcends all worldly conceptions. He reveals that there are 3 kinds of acquired self, gross, mind-made, and formless, corresponding to the 3 worlds of sensuality, form, and formlessness. In the 11th sutta, the Buddha declares that there are 3 types of miracle: psychic powers, telepathy, and the miracle of Dharma teaching or instruction, which is the greatest miracle of all because it confers emancipation. The first category of miracle includes such powers as self-replication, invisibility, passing through matter, etc. Although these powers are not normally witnessed, interestingly, there are 2 contexts in which they are seen: the psychedelic experience and the UFO phenomenon. The miracle of teaching relates to the power of truth. We also see that meditative concentration, or samadhi, can be used to gain access to the deva worlds to answer spiritual and metaphysical questions, and that God is a phony. Finally, transdual consciousness, where material forms find no footing, is characterized by signlessness, boundlessness, and all luminosity, which I noted is very similar to a comparable conception in Kabbalah. In the 12th sutta, the Buddha rejects the philosophy of egoism and advocates a philosophy of social responsibility based on altruism. Finally, in the 13th Sutta, which we have just been discussing, the Buddha declares that the true Veda was revealed by the rishis, male and female shamans, married with children, whose spirituality was grounded in ecstatic experience, unlike the Brahmins, who no longer have any connection to experiential spirituality, but rely on liturgy, sacrifice, and chant. Elsewhere, we have discussed how the spirituality of the rishis was based on the soma sacrifice, which originally consisted in consuming a psychedelic sacrament, and not unlike the ayahuasca cult of Peru. The Buddha also reveals the way to union with Brahma, which consists of self-control, jhana, and meditation on loving-kindness or metta, directed towards the whole sensual creation, that is to say, the world of sensuality, or the Kamaloka, and all created beings, and declares that only he who is like Brahma will attain to rebirth in the Brahma worlds. So, next week we begin the second division of the Digha Nikaya, called the Great Division, consisting of 10 suttas. These suttas are longer than the suttas of the moralities, consisting of 16 pages on average, compared to 9 pages in the first division, so in the moralities. So we'll have quite a bit of material to cover over the next 10 weeks. Before we proceed on, before we proceed on to the dedication of merit, whereby we dedicate the merit of this talk to all beings, does anyone have any questions or thoughts about the Sutta or the Great Division of the Digha Nikaya? And while you're thinking about that or typing, I'd just like to mention that if you are interested in following my activities in Second Life, please join my group, the Dharma Transmission to the West group, and you're also welcome to visit my sim located in Visit Atoll called Zhuangzi. So, does anyone have any questions before we proceed to the dedication of merit? Okay, it seems not. So let's proceed with the dedication of merit and conclude the talk. Sorry, just give me 1 second. There we go. Whatever understanding, whatever positive force has come from this, may it go deeper and deeper and act as a cause to reach enlightenment for the benefit of all. Thank you very much for this opportunity to discuss Dharma. It is my pleasure and privilege. And we'll see you next Saturday at 3 p.m. Second Life time. Thank you.